Hello and welcome back to Cheer Up the podcast. We're not cancelled yet, Jane. We're still going. This is season 2, episode 3. Hope you're listening on Spotify, TikTok, Instagram, wherever. We're everywhere. So make sure you're subscribing and liking and
doing all of those things.
All the comments. So we're excited. We've got a guest on. That's why we both
have.
That's I'm sat like on top of Jane.
Well,
we have got the very renowned Joanna Gamper Cuthbert. I think I've said that right. I need to stop talking to the camera and talk to the mic.
Yeah.
It's because I'm used to TV, you see. I'm not used to...
Honestly.
I'm used to the high life, darling.
Oh, we know, Diva.
And a little clip
we
mic
know.
Here. But yes, Joey is from SportCheer England, but also she's now a writer.
She is. And a very, very knowledgeable lady and one of my favourite people in the industry.
Shall we, without further ado, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Cheer Up.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I've just had the pleasure of sneaking a little ear in on the last podcast that you did. And I'm really excited to be here. I'm really loving all of the content that you guys are doing and how positive it is and what a positive spin you put on the industry. So I'm really pleased to be here and part of that.
That's really good because that's been our intention from day one. So we're really glad that people are recognising that who are actually in the industry as well, you know, that they can see that positive take. On that note, Joey, we have got SportCheer England. Now, my understanding from this is I don't think people have got a really clear and concise view of what SportCheer England is. Yeah, what SportCheer England is and what its aims and objectives are. Could you give us a brief overview on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, SportCheer England is the national governing body, or the recognised federation for cheerleading in England. So with most other sports, you will have a federation or a national governing body, or an NGB as they're abbreviated to. We love a good acronym in sport, don't we?
An NGB.
An NGB.
Yes.
And that NGB will govern the sport, so it will regulate what happens in it. So it will say how people can credential as coaches. It will say how competitions run. It will look after continued professional development, how coaches learn. And for most sports, a national governing body has grown up at the same rate as the sport. So as the sport developed, so did the governance of it. So if you think about the ECB, the English Cricket Board, it's been going for about 200 years, you know, alongside the sport of cricket, and it's grown up and developed and helped create those regulations. In cheerleading in the UK, you know, as you guys will know, and I'm sure actually you've probably got lots of younger listeners who are, you know, coming into being third generation in our country.
Yes.
You know, the history of our sport is that we've been going in this country for about 30 years, would you say?
Yeah.
And it started with parents whose kids wanted to cheer, seeing stuff on TV in America, bringing over Americans who helped them develop their clubs. They eventually developed competition event providers who created education to create coaches who would create teams to come to their competitions. And so we've created this neat little sort of private ecosystem in this country that's been going for 30 years. But what has happened alongside that is that we've got no regulation. There's nobody saying who can start a club, who can run a competition, who can educate. So it's been a bit like the Wild West, and that is not to say that there is not lots of good work going on, because we are really lucky that we've got some fantastic education providers, we've got some incredible event providers, you know, we've got fantastic clubs all doing good stuff. But we know that there are in the UK an estimated 89,000 athletes. So that equivalent is about 900 to 10 clubs. So you know, there's a lot of stuff that could be going on. You know, and so just to give you like a little bit of history before I kind of segue back into that. We'll know that we've had Team England going out to the ICU World Cheerleading Championships for the last 9-10 years. And that the ICU is the International Governing body as recognised by the Olympics. And when they set up their World Championship, some of the larger clubs, because we had nobody governing us, there was no one saying who should be Team England, who should be the world team. You know, some of our larger clubs who, you know, thankfully had got some fantastic people in them, got together and said, what if we had a unified team that went out and represented the country? And so they got together and started Team England, and we were taking a team, I say we, I wasn't part of it, but taking a team out to the Royal We, England, was taking a team out to the ICU Championships. And the ICU said, you know, actually, as part of our application to the Olympics, we need to demonstrate that every country that is attending has a federation. So we are charging you to go back and develop a federation for your country, but it would also be good for your country to have that. You know, and that was the stage at which I got involved in SportCheer England, and it was because I'd been involved in the development of the adaptive abilities team England. And I was frustrated that there was no one to support. I had imagined, I don't know what I thought was going on, but I'd imagined that somewhere there was this support that I'd be able to pick up a phone and someone would tell me what I was going. So what can I do? Am I allowed to do this? And I thought, oh God, there's no one telling me I can or can't. This is kind of weird. And at the same time as that, for me, I had this real passion for safeguarding and for how we safeguard young people in our sport, and recognising that we had about 89,000 young people with nobody saying, you know, what are the basic minimum standards that we should be expecting in a club, anything like that. And so when the opportunity came up and the ICU had supported some of those individuals that were involved in Team England to begin that process of developing a national governing body, when the opportunity came up to apply for a position, I did so, one, because I'm like, I felt I can't moan about it and complain about it unless I'm prepared to be part of the solution. And two, being really passionately driven by this idea that we need to create some regulation. So that we can safeguard young people. And also, in safeguarding young people, safeguard and future-proof our sport. Because in a way, it's not an if something happens, it's a when it happens. And it's how we manage and deal with that. And, you know, we need a framework of governance. And so at the moment, what SportCheer England is doing is we are essentially having to retrofit governance and regulation onto a private ecosystem. And that's really hard because, you know, clubs go, well, we've been managed all this time without it. Why would we need it now? Like, what's it going to do? But I do think that we're coming to a sort of an apex in our sport where our sport will die if we don't future-proof it. And one of those ways of future-proofing it is ensuring that clubs have all the appropriate things in place. So that's one part, that's a small part. And I know Jane talked on a previous podcast about the fact that SportCheer England, in order to become a member, your club coaches submit their DBS checks, their safeguarding certification, first aid, insurance. So they're demonstrating that they have those things, and those are verified, and they get a, you know, you actually each coach gets their own digital wallet, so they've got a QR code, so they can show that. So they can demonstrate their minimum standards. And lots of parents that contact us assume that clubs have that in place. Not all of them do. And it's not to say that clubs that haven't joined us yet don't have those things in place, but that is a benchmark for us to be able to regulate. But the other thing is that we're just getting started. You know, people are saying, well, I'll sit back, I might join SportCheer England when I see what it is that you can do. But we need clubs to be part of what it is that we're trying to achieve. So lots of the things that you talk about on your podcast all the time about how could we get more consistency across scoring, how could we introduce more elements to education, you know, different aspects of continued professional development for coaches, how do we improve things around competition. SportCheer England wants to act as the voice for the clubs. We need a voice that is representing the clubs to speak to the stakeholders of the event providers as one voice, so that collectively as a sport we can create this continuity and grow. And you know, we've already had some really exciting opportunities to be that voice for the sport with government. You know, we had it was a bit of a baptism of fire. Jane was a board member. She was a regional rep for SportCheer England when we first launched, and the first thing that happened was COVID hit.
Yes.
And the Department for Culture, Sport and Media said, well, no cheerleading clubs can go back unless they have, unless you have a return to play guidance document submitted by your national governing body. It has to be assessed by the DCMS. It has to be signed off by Public Health England. That was us.
Yeah, it was.
That was us. And honestly, Jane and I will tell the stories of, I mean, everyone knows COVID was awful. We were there were several of us, including me, on lockdown, who were trying to home educate kids, and then we would start our meetings probably at 7 p.m, wouldn't we? And we'd go through to midnight. 3 a.m. sometimes, working on this document so that we could get clubs back. Yeah. So that there is a you know, that's while that was absolute hell, wasn't it, Jane? It was the worst. It was absolutely awful.
It was. And if you remember, I'd had my full knee replacement and I was in plaster with my leg up.
I mean, honestly, what we went through, but I think that was, in retrospective, in hindsight, that was a good demonstration of when a national governing body speaking on behalf of the sport, on behalf of the community, can actually get things done.
Yeah.
You know, so...
Because without that, we wouldn't have been able to go back, would we, Joanne?
No, we wouldn't. And we had clubs phoning us saying, you know, we've been open for 25 years and we're literally going to have to close our doors, and this is my business, this is my livelihood, if you can't do that. And that was really challenging for us, because at the time we didn't have a relationship with Sport England, which we now do, and I can give you an update on that in a minute. But, you know, I say that there are probably people at the DCMS, Public Health England and Sport England, who've got my phone number in their mobile phone saved as do not answer, because I will share something with you now, which Jane does know, but I don't talk about publicly. But what we went through, because we were outside of that sport recognition process at the time, occasionally someone would write to us from Sport England, and usually what they'd write to us and say was, sorry, we can't help you because you're not a recognised sport. And what I'd do, every time somebody different would email us, I'd go and look them up on LinkedIn. I'd look up, when did you graduate? And I'd think, who's the youngest person who might be naive enough that if I DM'd you, you would give me a contact detail and I'd get an in.
Yeah.
And so I was picking off what I felt was perhaps the most naive or weak members of the government to help us. And when they gave us a phone number, God help them, because I was on the phone every day saying, you need to help our sport.
Yeah.
We are a huge participation sport. Yes, you don't recognise us yet as a sport, but there are hundreds and hundreds of clubs. And not only that, we have huge female participation. We are literally fulfilling all of your KPIs for the next 10 years, your investment principles. We're doing that, and it's really exciting, but we need your help. And so, you know, that's a very long answer to what SportCheer England is about. But I would really encourage clubs and say, you know, be part of this, because if you're not, you will get left behind. I don't mean that in an unkind way. We want to support you. Want to help, We're here to help and support, but we can only do that if we are all in it together.
Yeah, well, as a Jen, collective. I'm going from the accredited mark when we're back.
Well,
I'll be joining.
I've been saying this before, haven't I? I've said it on previous podcasts that, like, as a collective, we are stronger. Yeah. So, and it's taking working people together to actually speak out, like say that's the reason of the podcast, is to speak out, to say, and to educate people around how we need to improve our sport, because we've always been passionate. We're here for that reason, because we're passionate about our sport and we want it to do so well. Now, just going back to one of the positives about, you know, being a SportCheer England member was when you're at an event, and some of the event producers have started to put this in place already, was your DBS checks. You know, like certain different event providers have different, this is why it's a headache, different checklists, like, oh, you need your DBS to get into warm-up. No, that's okay. Some check, some don't. And we was at a competition, and I was just like, we've got the QR code for SportCheer England, and you can't argue with that, because everything is up to date. Not just your DBS, but
Everything, yeah.
But not just that, but everything you need to cover yourself as a club, as a coach, as somebody who is taking somebody's most precious commodity, their child, into your care. And without these things and without the training or without the provision, we're not doing a good service. We need to be delivering a good service.
And what's been really interesting, so I'm passionate about culture change, about, the reason I said I loved your podcast is because you're about being positive, and I'm passionate about positive culture change. And I've had to learn in the role that I'm in, and especially I sit on 2 committees at the ICU level. I sit on their ethics committee and their entourage committees. God, it's hard work because I want it to be a sprint, and actually this process is a marathon.
Yes.
And culture change takes time.
Yeah.
But a good example of that, with you talking about the different components that we require from our clubs, is when we first launched the membership and we were phoning and reaching out to clubs and saying, are you gonna join? Some of them were saying, we're not ready to yet. And I said, what do you mean you're not ready? And they said, well, we don't have all our paperwork in place. And I'm like, interesting, what paperwork don't you have in place? Because the things that we're asking of you are the bare minimum that you should have in place, not only to protect the children, but to protect yourself as a coach and a gym owner as well. And one of the benefits of membership, we provide template policies, risk assessments. We've got a whole suite of policies and support and guidance that went out to our clubs just before Christmas around travel teams. And we also provide regular quarterly webinars, and we ran one on insurance. We had Andy Goulburn from Howden's Insurance, who's their head of sports and entertainment, come and talk to us about different types of insurance, because I think parents, if you see an advert for a local cheer team, you just assume that all this stuff is in place. And it's we've had emails from parents who've maybe had a concern about a club, and they've been horrified when they've discovered they're not a member, or that they may not have those things in place. But on the flip side of that, we're also there to protect and support and guide the clubs. If they've got an issue, something that they need support with, we're there to support them. And so there's a real value in it in terms of demonstrating that you have what you need, but also as a checklist for yourself as an organisation. And we want to grow the resources that we offer clubs. We want to develop the continued professional development. We want to work with competition event providers. One of the things that we know that we're not going to be able to run the competition. We're not suddenly taking over people's private businesses. But that next step is around a sanctioning process. So that EPs can sign up to become a sanctioned event with us. And again, it's the same as we will have done with the clubs. It's about minimum standards. So there'll be some EPs where people are saying, they've not got this in place, they've not got that in place. But actually, if those are essential standards around health and safety, safeguarding, qualifications of your judges, or whatever it is, that we're saying that actually those are the minimum standards that we expect as clubs if we're attending an event. And I know lots of EPs have that in place. I'm not saying that they're all but we need to raise the bar, and we need to bring everybody up to that standard, so there is consistency in terms of what we're expecting. And on that really basic level around health and safety. What does a warm-up space look like? And
are the staff in that warm-up DBS check, because they're the one that the kids are coming through that space? It's all right checking if we are.
How is it staffed? Staff. Absolutely. But those next steps, those require an operational staff. So everything that we've achieved so far, from writing a return to play guidance document, and honestly, Theo, I'll tell you, I picked up the phone to Basketball England and I said, can you help us? And they said, I said, what are you doing? How are you writing your return to play? And they said, well, we've formed a consortium with the English Cricket Board and the FA, and we're pooling our medical staff. And I was like, yes, we will also pool our medical staff of our 5 volunteers who are what we've achieved over the last 4 years through volunteers, through networking, through people who've offered services pro bono to us is incredible. But it is unsustainable. So if we want this to happen, the next stage is that we need funding for this national governing body, and at the moment our only funding stream, and nobody's being paid, but our funding stream in order to deliver what we have delivered comes through club memberships. So getting the sport recognition through Sport England will allow potentially an injection of funding. It will certainly allow us to be opened up to other funding streams because of the legitimacy of our recognition. But you know, to the clubs who are saying, well, I'm going to wait and see how well you do, what services you can offer before I sign up. We can't do it without you. You're part of this. This is a collective, effort.
I think one of the pain problems within that is we have a lot of community clubs, like you've mentioned this yourself, Theo, and there seems to be almost a frowned upon rule of earning money or making a profit from this, because it's something that you do and you love, and it was my full-time income. It was like any other business. I am providing a service, a provision. Yes, I'm up late at night, taking emails, taking all of these things. And then you've got this mindset of people sort of think it's like a community thing, so you shouldn't be making a profit from it, or you work really hard. I mean, nobody says this to Richard Branson. Well, why are you making all this money on this aeroplane that's travelling to and from this place? Well, because I'm providing a service and this is what I'm doing. And in order for your provision that you need for your basics, whether you are a community club and you're doing it non-for-profit, there are still costs to run a club and to keep it sustainable. And if you can't provide a DBS check for your coaches or safeguarding, then basically you shouldn't be running a club.
No.
Yeah, and I mean, some of those things are not even requirements of us as a national governing body. They're legal legislation.
Exactly.
That you should have in place if you are working with young people. And I know that one of the criticisms that we have had as an NGB is the cost to membership. So I'd love to explain why we've got club membership rather than individual athlete membership at the moment, and also that around that cost. So
my question answered. That was my question too. There we go.
I know. I listened to the podcast. I know where you're coming from. When I first came into the position as chair at SportCheer England, my first question was, well, how many clubs and athletes have we got in the country?
Yeah,
we didn't know, because we've got no centralised organisation. We had no NGB. There was no metric. Who was measuring it? How are we measuring it? We measure it through membership, and we don't have any membership. So I was very fortunate that I have not got a history with any particular event provider or club in the country where I was actually able to go to our largest event providers and say, look, as a neutral person, will you share your data from the last season with me? And then in terms of the numbers of clubs and athletes that you've got, I won't share it with any other EP, but I'm actually collating this data because we need to have some kind of sense of how many of us there are. Because how can we begin this process? How can we project and forecast any budgets, create any framework for a governance of a sport we have no idea how many people are in? So that number that I keep quoting, around 89,000,
we expected it to be a lot more, didn't we?
I think it will be more now.
Definitely.
We had a drop off during COVID, but actually we had a massive surge since then as well.
Yes.
Certainly in my club, kids have come from everywhere. I don't know what it is about cheer at the moment, but people know it's
people love it, and because it's fantastic. It's an incredible sport. But in knowing that huge number, and by the way, if we had that many athletes, members of SportCheer England, we would be larger than several other national governing bodies in this country. Running sports that at high
welcomes
profile,
everybody as well.
High profile. But I knew that if we were going to start a membership, so that because one of the metrics by which Sport England decides whether you are the national governing body is, do you represent the majority of the sport? So how many members do you have? They have a magic number. If you don't reach that number, you can't even begin the application process. And I knew that if we started with athlete membership, if we pressed go on athlete membership, we could potentially have 89,000 young people's data suddenly what are we doing with that? Why have we got it? How are we collecting that safely? And what service are we offering them? Like, what value could we give back in that moment?
Yeah.
And we felt that was, for a volunteer organisation at that point, unsustainable capacity-wise. And what we needed to do was create a scalable model.
Yeah.
So we said, we'll start with club membership.
Yeah.
So it is the club that is the member. It is the club that pays the membership dues. It is the club that we can offer something back to, that we feel that we can offer back at the moment, because we can create the template policies and processes. We can give you advice on risk assessment. We can help with insurance. We can provide safeguarding support. There's a tangible value that we can offer a club at the moment. But there's got to be some sort of way that we create a scale for payments. We can't have the huge clubs with 900 kids in it paying the same as the club that has 30 kids in it. And so there's a scale, and I know it's hard because there's always going to have to be a cut-off point, and there'll always be one club that has one member over. But actually, that lowest end of the scale, if you had 15 kids in your club, that would be a tenner each.
Yeah.
And actually, if you asked most parents, and I know we ask a lot of money from parents, cheerleading isn't a cheap sport at the moment, the way that a lot of clubs operate. But I can guarantee you, if you said to your parents, £10 a year, each of you, like you were saying, if you're running like a business, you're thinking about, how do I budget in all of my costs at the start of the season so that I can give upfront fees to my parents. Budget it in. I swear every parent would be like, yes,
there you go.
Take this. And for some of those larger kids, it works. Larger programs, it works out less than a couple of quid.
Yeah,
But when you have a parent,
and I think
who
parents
would
fundraise for you as well. If you was up front, and said, look, this is what we need, and in order for the club to run and ultimately safely for your children as well. Like, I always remember you coming in and doing the safeguarding for us, Joey, and you did this thing about the internet, like just write your name in and what comes up. That blew my mind, and it was such a simple thing, and it really struck home with our athletes and our coaches, because you've done the safeguarding for Tycoons, but there was so many like other avenues, and for me, like, the safeguarding is so important around the social media and everything else that we've got today. But what value can you put on the safety of your athletes, or the safety as you as a club, or the safety as you as a parent? And yes, it can be costly, and especially the training side, on the educational side, if you've got 10 coaches, it's a pricey affair.
But I think when it comes to
any other business,
the things that we could offer, if you look at British Gymnastics, Swim England, Basketball England, and you look at the costs that they offer for their continued professional development or their coaches courses, those are subsidised. Who are they subsidised by? They're subsidised by Sport England, because they're a recognised national governing body.
Yes.
So once we have sport recognition with Sport England, which is why we are keen on that process, is not just to legitimise cheerleading, but it actually opens up funding streams which allow us to then begin subsidising those things, so that we can start to reduce those costs. And once we have NGB recognition, it will also open up funding streams to clubs, particularly that will be important to grassroots levels clubs. So you may be aware, we sort of soft launched the fact that Sport England gave us sport recognition last month.
Yes.
Which is super exciting, but it's only half the puzzle. And the other part is the NGB recognition, and Sport England even said to us, look, we're recognising you as a sport.
Yeah.
But you might not want to announce that yet, because actually we consider cheerleading to be high risk as a sport, because it has because of the nature of the sport, tumbling, stunts, etc. So until we see that it is governed appropriately, till you can demonstrate that you are ensuring coaches have the right education to be able to deliver the training that they do in the clubs, we won't release funding. Wow. But at the point at which we get NGB recognition, what it'll mean for your club is that you can apply to your local council And your local council will have funding that is ring-fenced for recognised sports, but you will have to be a member of the national governing body in order to be able to apply for it.
Yeah.
Because they'll want to know that your club meets certain standards that they are going to allow you to, have public purse.
Absolutely.
So there's this real kind of cyclical thing to it. We can reduce costs when we have funding. When we have funding, we can subsidise. When we can subsidise, clubs can grow. But there's got to be a moment where we come together and we do this. And I truly believe, I think that we've got an incredible board of passionate people that come from a range of experience and professional. We've got someone who's sports legal. We've got someone from the Rugby Football Union, someone from Swim England, someone from the FA, all of them also cheer backgrounds, but they bring this experience from other sports or from legal professions. Our designated safeguarding lead, Michelle Draper, is the former CEO of British Ice Skating.
Wow.
We are attracting good talent who see the value in doing this. They are excited about the idea of helping cheerleading to professionalise, to regulate, to future-proof the sport. And I think if we can't do it this time, I don't think it's possible for cheerleading to be governed. I think we are in the best possible place now.
I totally agree with you. And when we first started being on the board, seeing this process, when we was looking about other people from outside of the cheer industry to come in to be on the board, I think there is a myth around SportCheer England that people think it's just governed by people in the industry.
And I think when it first started and we were getting kind of comments, it was, but also I think people had this idea that, well, it's just like a university society, isn't it? You get a treasurer, a social secretary and a president, and off you go, get everyone's name on a spreadsheet, and here we are. But actually a national governing body is about a huge part of it is about a framework for governance. And if you are applying to Sport England, they've got very strict criteria by which they do that. There is something which you can go and look it up on the Sport England website called the Code for Sports Governance, and it is a document of standards to which national governing bodies are held, and quite rightly so, because if they were about to give us a huge amount of funding to go and deliver lots of stuff, they'd want to know that we were governed appropriately.
Exactly.
And for us as a new NGB, that was really exciting because we could start building that from the ground up exactly to a blueprint of what they wanted. The Code for Sports Governance was only introduced about 9 years ago. So if you were, one of those older NGBs, if you were the Rugby Football Union that's been going for 200 years, suddenly you're having to sort of like crowbar in all this new governance. You've got all of these old white pale male and stale men and all these regional groups who don't want anything changed. We weren't facing that, but we are growing something new. And when we look at like British Gymnastics or Swim England or something like that, and we see look at all the stuff they've got, and I'm like, well, yeah, but look how long they've been going. We're right at the start of this process, and it's a bit like a startup business, really. And we need the clubs to be the investors.
We need the backing from the clubs and just as from the sport as a whole to elevate our sport to where it needs to be. Like we mentioned on previous podcasts, like you've touched on ICU and Team England. Like we're coming home with goals. We've got really talented athletes and coaches in this country that we can propel this sport so much more forward if we are a collective and think outside of the box and think, well, because most people are like, well, what's the NGB? What are they going to do for us? What's the national government, like the code of governance, the course that me and you had to sit on for hours and hours and hours. I can't remember what that was.
The Sports Governance Academy. We both did the course, didn't we?
Yeah. We did.
So the work that's going in behind the scenes that people are not seeing.
Yeah, and I think these are the pain areas when people are like yourself. I know what work Joey's done behind the scenes, and it is absolutely incredible. There's so many things that you could say and things that we couldn't even air because of governance and safety aspects. But the work that is going on behind the scenes has been huge. Continues to be huge, but there's still a massive gap as to people's knowledge behind what SportCheer England is and how we're going to get that in,
because I think people and quite, it makes sense, doesn't it? People see the outworking of it. They see what goes on the social media or what they can tangibly get, and I don't mean to sound like a martyr, but because I work 3 days a week for a dance company, and the other 2 days a week I should be working freelance doing the other business that I have, and actually I've probably spent the last 2 years volunteering 2 days a week to SportCheer England, and if you said, well, what have you got to show for that? Well, a lot of that time that is meetings where I'm trying to convince somebody to develop. We've got, if you just take for example the membership platform with Sport80, so that is like we were talking before about how are we gathering people's data, what are we doing with that? Well, if we're going to be a serious sport and we're going to have loads of clubs and athlete membership will be the next step, so we need a platform that can scale with us. We need a platform that is data secure. That requires that took 6 months of onboarding, of us building out that platform to ensure that it was going to be able to do what we needed it to do, that it was going to be able to scale with us. It can do loads of really cool, exciting stuff that we're not doing at the moment on it. We can host events through it. We can run rankings for clubs. We can do. I've just signed a contract for us with First Advantage, so you're going to be able to do your DBS check directly through your profile.
So much easier.
So we're going to have. So all of that's going to be done directly through the platform. We also set up and signed a contract with Globacol, who are a safeguarding case management software program which integrates with Sport80. So if something comes into safeguarding about a particular club, Michelle on Globacol can look up that club. If they are a member, she can immediately bring over their details so she can contact the DSL from that club. But all of these things have a cost to them. They all have an associated license and a cost and time to do all the onboarding and all of that kind of stuff, and it's it's boring and it doesn't show anything to people on the outside. Well, I haven't got my free course or my whatever else, but this is the stuff that's got to happen first.
And when you need it,
and I think that's the thing that we've experienced, is that when we've had clubs that have been in trouble or needed our support, or who've needed a letter of recommendation, or who've asked us to speak on their behalf for some reason, or who've had a safeguarding concern, it's been when we've walked alongside those clubs and supported them through those processes that they've suddenly gone, I get it now. I get why, and not every club has needed us, thank goodness. But particularly, and Jane, you'll testify to this, the minute you say we're a national governing body, which we had to do early doors when we weren't actually in a state to be able to do that, really. We didn't have the structure and support in place to do that. But as soon as you say that, everybody goes, because we've never had an NGB before, great, I've got somewhere to escalate my concern, my complaint, or my safeguarding to. And we were inundated. Absolutely inundated with concerns, with complaints, with not all of them safeguarding, across a range of issues. People need somewhere to take this to. We can't be relying upon clubs to just figure these bits out and on their own.
So when I picked up from the train station, we had an interesting conversation. But what was really interesting for me was the recent event at the NCA and how you stepped in and how it was better for some than others. Can you just explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so obviously we were aware of the incident, the evacuation at NCA, within moments of it happening, because social media. And majority of those clubs from the UK that were out there were SportCheer England members. And within minutes, we were able to, we had all their contact details because they're in our systems. We were able to contact them, do roll calls with them. For those clubs that weren't, we were contacting them through social media, or it was their info @ address on, and actually because our industry is relatively small in this country relative to, say the US, we were able to get hold of phone numbers, and we were able to do those roll calls relatively quickly, but nowhere near as quickly as we were with our members. And that was frightening for me, because I think that night I was up till 3-4 in the morning ensuring that we had heard back from every club. Thankfully, not all of those clubs were even in the building at the time. But we know that there can be vicarious trauma as a result. Things that perhaps a young athlete saw on social media, from somebody that was in the, I don't know if you saw, but there was social media coming out, kids filming themselves locked in bathrooms, crying, I don't want to die. All of that kind of stuff. If you were an athlete who was there but not there, you might start to be traumatized by it. You're thinking, well, what if it was me? What if it could have happened to me? So we know that whether you were in the building evacuating, which some of our clubs were, or not, there's a real trauma impact. And our responsibility was, how are we first of all going to ensure that the UK teams are safe, and then what are we going to do to support them? So we've been privately working with those clubs, offering support through a clinical psychologist and families therapist, supporting their designated safeguarding leads. We hosted a webinar and some resources and talked to them. And we've also, you will have seen on our social media, but we also, obviously we've sent it to the clubs, but we've, as a wide call out, asked those that were there to write to us about their experiences. One, because it's a helpful process to listen to people's experiences, but two, for us, we intend to write a report on that and submit that to the international governing body and to USA Cheer about our experience as an international team. Asking questions for everything from what was your experience of the security, how were you evacuated, how did you feel, what follow-up communications did you receive, etc. But also that helps us build, if you go back to our conversation where we were saying about sanctioning event providers, that helps us build what are the baseline expectations that we would have of an EP were an evacuation to take place at a competition here. We're also running a webinar which is open to members and non-members next week. So I know this isn't going to be going out then, but in March, with an expert, a safeguarding and risk management expert who specialises in large-scale sporting events and evacs, who's going to be coming onto a webinar for members, and we've got a non-member pay rate so that it's open to everybody. But particularly we want to capture, because we're recording this in March, particularly we want to capture those travel teams that are going out to ensure that they've got all the risk assessments in place that they need and the right insurance in place, and that they feel confident to take those teams, because I'm imagining there's going to be quite a high level of anxiety. And we have a responsibility as the national governing body to support clubs, firstly those clubs that were out there who've experienced something, but also those clubs that are going out that may be anxious.
It's a lot.
It is. And maybe will that be recorded as well, that webinar?
So that has been recorded. At the moment it's available to those that have that recordings will go out to all members. They do for all of our webinars. But for those that have non-members who've paid to be on it, they'll get a copy of that recording. Maybe we could have a link
on our socials that goes towards that, so if we'll do a little
to help
link so that people can actually get access to that, because I think that's
and we partnered with before Christmas, and if someone becomes a member today, they'll get all of the suite of free policies that have gone out. But before Christmas we partnered with Cheer Travel UK to produce a suite of supporting documents for travel teams, and that includes a template risk assessment, and that's everything from how are you managing safety for your athletes in your villa through to active shooter drills. you know, and everything in between, because, you know, hopefully nothing's going to go wrong. But if you're not, but prepared is, you know, forearmed is forewarned. You know, if you've got the things in place, then you know what to do if something does happen. And interestingly, when Michelle first came into post as our designated safeguarding lead, she undertook a sort of a review of recent safeguarding concerns, and there was a high number of those that come from travel teams. So things that happen abroad. Often that's where there are pinch points where things can go wrong. And so to support clubs in that environment.
Moving on from that, we're going to close up with that. But before we do, because obviously we've mentioned a lot about safeguarding, Joey has written a book.
You've written a book?
She's a very clever lady.
Very knowledgeable. Honestly, I've just literally just sat in that full episode like, wow.
Yeah.
I've literally just took all of that in, because I'm actually not a member, but I'm now going to become a member.
Yes.
Sorry to my parents, but you get an extra charge next season.
But it will be minimal. It's not going to be huge, and what the benefit is great.
Well, we want to, obviously, I'm preparing my girls to go international, and we definitely would need all that safeguarding and stuff like that. We've got all safeguarding in place at the moment, but I want to be able to showcase that we are a part and we support the governing body and all that they stand for. So 100%, because it's trying to build policies. And I think
if there was ever a hall of fame for like moving cheerleading forward, Joey, you should be in the hall of fame, because honestly, the work you go about your work very humbly, and I've worked with you, so I know I'm not just saying that for, you know, anything. You're so passionate, you do so much for girls in sport across the board, but you also we have a lot to thank you for in this industry, and I don't think you get enough credit for it. So for me, if you ever see this lady out and about, give her a pat on the back, because she works tirelessly for this sport.
Oh,
so
thank you.
And it's what's needed as well for us.
Yeah.
Everybody just needs to, the doors are open, go inside, let's just close them and be there together and go through the process together.
Yeah, absolutely. Together we're stronger. And, you know, the reason that I got involved in this sport in a leadership role is probably the same reason everyone becomes a coach. It's because we see the value of what this sport can do. We are passionate about not just, you know, absolutely I love everything about the sport, the backflips, the pyramids, you know, all of that stuff, but I love all the other stuff that our sport can teach and the value of it. You know, I'm passionate about that, and, you know, that's what we need to celebrate and protect and future-proof. And, you know, because not everybody's going to go on to be a world's athlete, not everyone is going to make a career in the sport. You know, for some this is a hobby that they love, you know, and so we want to ensure that we make everybody, you know, feel welcome and come away from the sport, whether that's in 5 years or 25 years, or for some of us longer than that, you know, with a positive experience. And you know, my real passion around safeguarding comes from the fact that I don't want unsafe environments to be a barrier to someone experiencing the incredible sport that we know cheer is.
So what have you got?
So I have a gift for both of you. I have a copy of my book.
Oh, I love that.
Come and get a copy. I brought you both a copy. I'm going
to get her to sign it, because she will be saying
sign it.
I'll sign it for you both. Yeah, no, I wrote Squad Safe book purely for that reason, really. And I think I want to say to people, it's not a dry read. About when I first started writing, I did not intend to write a book, and it was going to be quite dry. I had this, through my experience of being at SportCheer England, I was like, I know that lots of people don't know how to write a safeguarding policy, so I'm going to write a PDF which is going to have all the headings that you'd have in a safeguarding policy, and underneath it I'll put an explainer as to why that's important, you know, why that should be there. And then I thought, after I'd done that, well, it needs some sort of introduction. I'll write a one-pager introduction. And I started writing this introduction that was really about infusing and making people passionate about why it was important. And I suddenly thought, oh, that's the interesting bit to read.
Yeah.
Not this, because actually, if you wanted to download a PDF of how to write a child protection policy or a safeguarding policy, I'm singing to the, you know, the preaching to the choir there.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, actually what we need to do is win hearts and minds around what creates a safe culture and what creates a positive culture. So actually, while there is the stuff in there, if you need to write a child protection policy, safeguarding policy, that is in there. Actually, the book explores much wider how we create safe psychological safety, contextual safeguarding. It looks at the issue of female health, which we don't talk enough about, anywhere near enough about in our sport. You know, how does female health impact the way that we train our athletes, and what effect does that have on them in terms of vulnerability? So you know, if we don't know it. I went to a conference and I heard Dr. Emma Ross from the Well HQ speak, who I quote, I tell this story in the book. But at the time, she was at the English Institute of Sport, and she'd just been assigned as the lead for the female athletes for Team GB for Rio. And she was giving a presentation that was talking about the importance of sports bras, not only for pain relief, but also in terms of the optimizing performance. You know, if you're not wearing a sports bra and you run a marathon, it's the equivalent of 1.5 miles extra lag on your body. You know, if you think about tumbling and transitions, you know, so there's. She talks about how menstruation affects different parts of your training. That's about high impact and pelvic floor. Wow. And I sat in this presentation and I thought, oh my God, we're not thinking about any of this in our sport, and we're 98% female. This has a serious impact on the way we train, but not only that, it has a serious impact on the safety and the vulnerability of our athletes if we're not talking about these things, or maybe we are talking about these things but not talking about them safely, which is another conversation. So in there I talk about it talks about female health, it talks about mental health, talks about the role of branding and marketing on safeguarding, how are we choosing to communicate and what are we choosing to communicate about our sport. Maybe at some point for your controversial corner, I talk about uniforms and my thoughts on uniforms. So it's absolutely packed with loads of things to think about. That it's much broader than just what you might imagine safeguarding to be. In fact, the start of the book is about, do you as a cheer gym know your mission's value and purpose? Because if you don't know that, if you don't have your values, what are you making your decisions and benchmarking against? And that frames everything. Because, you know, if we're really good in cheerleading, especially on social media, about talking about all the things that we do. The worst one I hate is #WeAreFamily. You know, because if that's what's going out on your social media, but that's not what's happening in the gym, we are gaslighting our athletes because we're saying one thing and we're doing another. And actually what we want is our values, mission, purpose, to everything to be in alignment, and what we say we do, and what we do, we say, so that our athletes trust us and we create that safe environment.
Amen to that, as is across the board, achieve greatness and be the best you aspire to be, and everything's built from that.
I mean, definitely. I mean, I'm literally, that's always been, here's the mission, what is our ethos, where are we, and when you get out of alignment in that, you know you're out of alignment in that as a club. And when you've got a sport that is very fast growing, and you might have said the #family, that's what we might have started out as, and then suddenly you've had this massive influx, and then it's like you've got to try and keep that all together with all those things. And other people who've been there like, we're not family anymore, we're not, and you're like, no, I actually get I actually understand what you're saying. So we're now at a time where we need to process, we need to go back to our values, because values, and as your club grows and the sport grows, changes. So you need to be, every season, you need to be going back and looking at your values and your ethos and what your mission is.
And that's a really interesting exercise that I challenge people in the book to, you know, if you do already, you know, for clubs that don't have it, I walk them through how you can create your missions, values and purpose statements, and how you can involve your athletes and your parents as stakeholders in that process, because we all know the more bought in they are to that, the more they're going to be part of that kind of culture that you want to create. But also a challenge in there that if you do have them, to go back through them and reevaluate them, and to ask your coaches and ask your parents and ask your athletes, do you know what they are? You know, because you might be really clear as a gym owner on what it is and why you're making certain decisions. But if your parents don't have buy-in to that, if your athletes don't have buy-in to that, or they're not seeing that worked out in the gym, then it's just a bit of paper, or it's something that you say on your website, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really important, because that's how you set the tone for your culture. Brilliant. Isn't it?
Well, where can they get this?
So Squad Safe is available at all good bookstores. It came out last month, and it's been at number 1 in the bestsellers list on Amazon since then. So it's in week 5, I think, as a bestseller. But you can get it from Waterstones, WH Smith's, wherever online bookstores. So yeah, and it's available in Kindle edition as well for those that don't want a paperback.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm really excited to hear what people's thoughts on the book. And my reason for writing it was I just want to share all the good stuff about our sport and how we can
share
be
your
better.
knowledge as well. This is one thing we say.
If you could feel the energy coming from Joey, she is like such a good soul, and you're just so genuine in what you want to do for this sport that it's. You've done an awful lot already, and I think this is a great book. So get it bought if you haven't.
100%.
And
sign up to SportCheer England and get behind us. And on that note, I'm gonna do my peg, because I've forgotten some of my other ones. Relentless. Relentless cheers. Oh my gosh, that's a really good one to come out. Relentless. Okay.
Love that.
That's us. Joey, thank you so much for being with us on the podcast. We really appreciate you being here, and hopefully to clarify some of the pains that people are thinking around SportCheer England, and clarifying that for us.
Yeah, and if people listen to the podcast and they've got questions, they can email. SportCheer England has a website. You can go get the email off there. Go and
we'll pop it on the link to this as well. So.
We want to engage with people. So,
we need to put it on the link tree thing on Insta, so that there's a link and they can just go straight there.
Fabulous.
Easy
do
peasy.
it. Yeah.
Well, with that being said, that was a long one, but it was an in-depth one.
Yeah.
But it was educational.
We might have to do part 1 and 2 in that.
Yeah. We might actually have to split that one up. It's all right. It gives us content. But that was, oh my God, I just can't believe how much I did not know. You just think that these people just they do this stuff, but that actually there's so much work that goes into stuff and a process that, and it's the same that we say all the time, and the process, and people need to get on board the process.
Absolutely.
Not fast cheer. Not fast cheer. Well, that was episode 3 season 2. I mean, we're getting on with these, aren't we?
Flying through.
You can find us on Instagram, on TikTok for all the fast content, not the fast cheer. But you can listen in on Spotify, rss.com, Amazon, we're on all of them platforms. But if you want to watch as well, we're on YouTube. That's the best one, because you can see our beautiful faces as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for tuning in. I have been Theo and Jane.
And I've been Jane Valentine. And I'm just going to do a little shout out to the people who do the podcast for us, Magoo Studios, because thank you so much. They're very patient with us.
And the amazing, can I say your full name? Joanna Gamper Cuthbert.
I wish I had a posh name like that.
I know. Thank you. Bye-bye.